Hello and welcome back to the Watford Way. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Sam Bunce, football journalist for Vavel UK. Sam, you have been at the centre of Watford's pre-season from Barnet all the way to Fiorentina. It's a pleasure to be with you. How are things?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me on. First of all, I've been keeping a close eye on Watford throughout the pre-season. For what it's worth, I know pre-season can sometimes be a bit of a drag, and people want to get on with the competitive fixtures. But there's things to unpick and takeaways under another head coach. So I'm happy to dig into all of that.
Perfect. Let's get into it straight away then, and we'll touch on head coach Allesio Dioni. Given your experiences watching him on the touchline so far, does he strike you as a particularly approachable character? How would you describe his personality from what you've seen so far?
Yeah, so I first watched him at Barnet, and he was incredibly animated and just full of energy on the sidelines. There's an obvious thing that his English is not particularly fantastic. There's a barrier that he has to overcome. But yeah, that energy sort of emanates onto the players, onto the pitch, I think, and it will go a long way if they can sort of emulate that. And yeah, as I say, in the Barnet game, it ended 2-2. But again, he was kicking his water bottle against the advertisement board, and yeah, kicking over the crates of water
Lots of
bottles. So
lots of classic Italian gestures, maybe
of
as well.
course, yeah, all of that. So I mean, he's just so invested and passionate from the get-go, I guess, in this preseason. And I mean, from a foreign manager's point of view, that's usually the case. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that close up. And then I spoke to him after the game at Fiorentina. We got a chance to speak to him, and yeah, he was definitely an interesting character. I think I sort of admired how he wanted to speak in full sentences in English. There was sort of some gaps in his knowledge and his vocabulary and everything. And he spoke slowly, a little bit broken, but there was an attempt there, and I admired that he challenged himself to do that. And yeah, he had a translator beside him to prompt him and sort of make sure he got the gist of what we were saying. So yeah, and he was very courteous as well. We shook our hands, and I was impressed with that. So yeah, there's going to be a language barrier there, I think. But I think when he's managing on the pitch, it will be short, snappy instructions in English, just shouting them out. But I've heard in interviews with players and from what has been going on in the media that the players are taken to him quite nicely, and he is able to have individual conversations with
Hmm.
them and get his point across in a way that they can understand. So yeah, there's going to be support that he'll need in sort of transmitting those messages. But with obviously Matty Pollock coming in as captain and other things, hopefully he can be a sort of lieutenant on the pitch to try and get those ideas across.
That's really positive to hear because I think that was a major concern from Watford fans heading into this season. Not helped, I think, at times by the lack of footage published by the club of Dionisi in training. But to hear you say that he can, speak fluently in sentences with the help of a translator, an interpreter, I think that's a positive to take. What we also learned from that interview, Sam, was that Matty Pollock has been appointed club captain. And whilst he's not the most technically gifted footballer, I think it's fair to say he more than makes up for that in heart and passion. What did Dionisi have to say about Matty Pollock and the decision he took to appoint him as club captain?
Yeah, so this was sort of revealed and came out after Fiorentina game, after sort of a question about Louza and him coming back into the fold. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of an impact with Louza's situation in terms of Matty Pollock getting the captaincy in the first place. So obviously, yeah, Matty Pollock has the character, and I think yeah, he's been around the club for a while now. He's ultimately still quite young, but from what I hear off the pitch and off the pitch and on the pitch, there's a guy there that is willing to step up into that role, and he's seen glimpses of that throughout previous seasons and leading by example from the back. So I think it's good that it's going to somebody who's willing to embrace it, and yeah, has those sort of leadership attributes that can go a long way. And he's vocal, he's a presence, and he represents sort of the fighting spirit that sometimes lacks. And we obviously saw him come out at the back end of last season and voice his sort of discontent and just how it all plummeted and at the end of last season. And that was quite a brave move. And a lot of people sort of commended it, even if Watford were, struggling. So I think, there's a lot of facets to his character, and I think he's a good person to take up the role, despite him being, a really, gritty centre back at the back there, I guess.
Yeah, he certainly strikes me as a more Troy Deeney-esque captain, very vocal, very loud, someone who the players will definitely hear on the pitch, put it that way. You mentioned there as well, Imran Louza. Of course, he joined the club late. He joined pre-season late because he was at that training camp with Morocco prior to the World Cup. He's been on an individual program before being reintegrated. What do you think the future lies ahead for him? Do you think Imran Louza may stay at Watford this season? Because I think a few weeks ago it was almost assert that he would definitely move on elsewhere to bigger and better things. But thus far, it doesn't seem like an offer has transpired for him. So I do find it interesting that we did see Imran reintegrated in that match against Fiorentina.
Yeah, I think the obvious thing for me was that he actually came on to replace Eduardo Bove in that game, who was captain because he was facing his former club where he suffered that cardiac arrest. And he came on and actually took the captain's armband, even though 20 minutes later he was obviously announced that he wouldn't be. So yeah, and I think in terms, as you say, there's been a lot of speculation about him seeking another move elsewhere, as well as the club. But yeah, I think he has something to offer in that midfield. We know the quality he possesses, and yeah, I think there's a couple, Eduardo Bove and Piero as workhorses beside him in that midfield. It could work, but you obviously have Hector Cipriano at the base and being someone who can dictate from there. So there's midfielders in there where he could build a connection with, and I don't think they would want to make him leave. I think the squad's in a good place for them to continue, and they don't need another fee to come in unless Aaron Kunda is the one to go this summer. So I think he will stay, but as you know, things can quickly change, and yeah, I believe that he still has a lot to offer at Watford. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, really. Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me, Sam, if maybe towards the end of the window, if nothing materializes, maybe a move back to France, or even like we saw with Georgi Shakpatatse, potentially a transfer over to Udinese.
Yes, yeah, Udinese has been, obviously something they've been leveraging. I think rightly, to be honest, Watford, because the finances are sometimes quite tight, and there's been a few, Watford fans have been a bit disgruntled about that, but that's the reality. Yeah, I think the Udinese link is important, and we've obviously seen Shakpadadze go there and incomings from that club. So yeah, you can't write it off. I think, yeah. We've obviously seen Piero come in. I don't think they have similar profiles, so I think they would be keen to keep hold of Louza. So we'll see. There's obviously that player power thing as well. We have to keep in mind. I mean, just him being on an individual training camp before reintegrating is an interesting one, and seeing how that relationship with Dionisi could be interesting too.
How has the team overall progressed since that first preseason friendly to what you saw against Fiorentina? We've seen a couple of new signings slowly integrated in Omar Traore, the right back, and Ika Bravo, who has come in as a striker, albeit so far it looks like he's been played almost as a 10.
Yeah, definitely. I think the inevitable thing with preseason is there's so much chopping and changing. I think Allesio Dionisi is right to be experimenting and making wholesale changes and using the youngsters. And I saw that at Barnet. The first half they started quite vibrant, the youngsters, and the senior players actually came on, conceded, and then managed to equalise and make it 2-2. And yeah, I think the Hansa Rostock game, moving on, I think the opposition wasn't particularly strong, but the occasion was memorable, and that was the main thing. I think it's a massive exception to what we usually get with these preseason friendlies. And then Fiorentina for me was the biggest and best sort of assessment, I guess, of where the squad is at and how they could fare in the Championship. And it looked like there wasn't really a gulf in quality between Watford and Fiorentina in that first half. And in the second half, as I say, the substitutions disrupted the flow. And we had that miss by Luka Kurimgard at the end, which a lot of fans, it sort of reignited the debate about the striker situation.
Mm.
That's pretty much the verdict from how they've progressed. I think, there's things to unpick, and I think there's combinations that he'll be keen to keep trying out, Dionisi. I think Ika Bravo at number 10, he's suited there. I think the numbers haven't been staggering in his output with goal scoring. So yeah, there's a player there, but I don't know if he's going to be the conventional number 9 that people want.
Yeah, I found it interesting because when Ika Bravo was officially announced by Watford, if you read the article on the website, they didn't actually name check him as a striker. They called him a versatile forward. So I thought they were very clever in their wording there. Where would you say the most positive play has come for Watford so far? For me, it would definitely be in those wide areas. I think Othmane Mama and Amin Nabazada actually has been a particular highlight.
Yeah, I think, Amin Nabizada definitely. And I'd say Nicholas Ciccovanni, both of them
Mm.
have caught my eye, certainly. I mean, they're both youngsters and, they've sort of broken into first team contention momentarily, at least. With the under 21s program being scrapped, that leaves their future in the air up in the air a little bit. And I think being offloaded on loan is could probably materialize. I think Naby Zada, particularly in that sort of left pocket in that vicinity of Othman Mama, has had something to offer. And again, in that Hansa Rostock game, he wasn't overawed. He was quite fearless. He tucked a really nice finish away, and that was quite impressive. And I think he started every single game in pre-season. And then Ciccovanni, that goal against Hansa Rostock, he's definitely got a strike in his back pocket. So they were
Reminds
two
me a bit
positives.
of, I mean, maybe this is the wrong comparison, Sam, but a bit like Kvaratskhelia at PSG, the way he strikes the
Yeah.
ball and the shape he gets his body into. That's the comparison I'm making.
Yeah, cutting in off the left. Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
he's Georgian. They're both Georgian, aren't they, as
yeah,
well?
they are. Yeah.
So yeah, potentially someone that could live up to that. His heights, but I'm not sure. We'll see. But in terms of the positivity, I think there were spells in particularly Hansa Rostock and Fiorentina games at Vicarage Road where there was just sustained passages of possession. They were spreading the play nicely out to those wingers, and causing a bit of threat. But ultimately, potentially a few shortcomings in front of goal and not putting enough deliveries in the box quick enough from those wingers. They were, good at getting past their man, but that could be something to, Dionisi can work on, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's a massive area of concern for me. That starting striker. We've got Luka Kiramgard, who was just signed on a permanent transfer from Udinese, and Mamadou Doumbia, who is a workhorse, but technically probably isn't quite there yet. Do you think the club should go out and bring in a number 9 of that more senior ilk? I know a lot of fans have called for that. And still touching on the topic of transfers, Sam, centre back is also an area of major concern with just Kevin Caben and Matty Pollock, the only real senior options there. So would you say a senior striker and definitely more depth at centre back should be the priorities moving forward for the rest of August?
Yeah, as I said, the Kurimgard miss at the end of the Fiorentina game certainly reignited the debates about getting another striker in this summer. But ultimately, he has signed on a 4-year deal permanently, and you can't turn back time. And that's unfortunately what they've decided on. For better or for worse. And that's what Dionisi has to work with. And I think he said to me when I asked him about Doumbia, because I thought he linked up play quite well. That he liked his out of possession contributions. And I thought he linked up play quite well in that first half. So there's something there in that area. But as we say, when Kurimgard offers that more sort of conventional number 9 and trying to get the best out of him finishing wise, there's still there's potentially a ceiling there for him to grow to. I think another option, they've obviously talked about and vowed to bring in these championship level players. But bringing in a championship level striker would be helpful. I think on loan they've talked about because of obviously finances. So I think loan would be a astute signing if Watford are trying to reach new heights, I guess. Um, but the priority and the first port of call this summer is certainly at centre back.
Mm.
With cover to Pollock and Kevin. And if one of them gets injured, you can't pin the blame on the manager if he doesn't have the resources to fill in that gap. So I think that will happen. They will get a centre back in to cover that. I think it's relatively straightforward. I think they probably lined it up. But I don't know if they would replace the two that usually start. And the striker situation, strikers we usually, get a lot of talk around them, but Kurumgard has attributes, but there is definitely room for somebody else to come in if they decide on that, I think.
I think Kieran Guard, Sam, very much relies on service. And I think what Watford need at the moment is a striker who can very much take the ball to feet and create chances themselves. And when you look at our wide players as well, Mama, Bar, Vata, Iran Kunda, they're very much head down, get past their man, do a couple of skills, and then cut back inside. Whereas I think for Luca or Mamadou included, maybe, they do need them repeated crosses into the box, get your head on it, a bit like we saw with Mileta Rajovic. So I don't think it's necessarily a Luca issue. I think he certainly has the quality to be a real poacher in the penalty area. I think it's more so actually the wide players we've recruited and how they look to play the game.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at recruitment, you should be looking at, how these players are going to mold and gel together and how they can complement each other. And there probably has been a bit of that going into their recruitment strategy. But I'd say, the wingers have their own attributes and they bring their own style to the table, especially Marma and Bar, dribbling and trying to torment defenders in that way by isolating them. But as you say, to get the best out of a striker, those crosses are going to be something we want to see more of, really. I think getting on the outside of the defender. And I think at Barnet, I saw Kurumgard's goal. It literally a cross steered into him. He tucked it away with a header. And so I think having wingers that are able to provide that service is important. And that's something Dioni can try and emphasize, I think.
And just finally on transfers, Sam, before we wrap up, Federico Ravaglia has signed for the club on a big contract, a 6-year deal from Italian side Bologna. What do you think this means for the future of Egil Selvik? We've seen Dan Bachmann feature very heavily in pre-season so far. And Selvik, of course, went out to the World Cup with Norway, played against France, conceded 4 goals. But I'm sure personally he'll have aspirations to play at a higher level and maybe even push for that international starting spot. I think it's becoming very clear, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, that Egil Selvik will look to move on elsewhere, with Dan Bachmann potentially in as the number 2.
Yeah, on Selvik, I think, he obviously sort of struggled to pin down that number 1 spot for Norway. I think he just featured in 1 game. And he was, obviously a reliable goalkeeper at Watford, if people want to call it that. He'll want to progress his career. Goalkeepers, is a weird position. They always want consistency, and sometimes that can be disrupted. And they're always seeking a new opportunity. On Selvik, I think a move to Udinese, there's been rumblings about that. And their keeper's actually injured at the moment, and I think he's got a shoulder sprain, so he's unlikely to feature in those first couple of weeks in Serie A. So there could be something in the pipeline there, I guess. I guess Daniel Bachmann they're trying to be contending for number 1, but I think he would be number 2 and deputising for Ravaglia. Ravaglia obviously comes from Bologna, a big contract. It's an interesting one. You'd think now he would be definitely settled as the number 1, undisputed, I guess. There's been some sort of good lines about him from Italian journalists. There was a few mistakes he made during the season when he was called upon. I think he will probably cement his place. I think Dioni will have knowledge of him. We'll see how it unfolds, and hopefully we can keep it nice and tight at the back this season.
Oh, I hope so, Sam. I hope so. We'll end with your season predictions. How do you think Watford will get on? The Carabao Cup kicks things off next weekend before three really tough fixtures against Southampton, Wrexham, and West Ham. We've got the expanded playoffs this year as well, which should make it more exciting. Where do you think Watford will finish in the Championship?
Yeah, I'll try not to upset anyone that I know. But yeah, no, I'll have a little think. So I think, yeah, I think the squad genuinely looks okay. I think it's, there's a lot of good players in the squad that they've recruited, and it's just about gelling them together. There's obviously the gaps we've talked about, yeah, it's going to be a tough season. We know the expanded playoffs as well are there to try and capitalize on, but we'll see about that. So I will go for a slight improvement from last season, from the 16th place finish, I believe it was.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go for a little bit of a mid-table finish. I'll go for 10th.
Yeah, you know what, Sam?
Knocking on
I
the door.
think given everything around the club at the moment, I would take that. I think I would take a 10th place finish. It's not too bad. It's not too
Yeah,
bad.
I know. I'm trying to glass half full, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I think as well the expanded playoffs, at the time it was announced, I was quite skeptical about it. I just viewed it more as a commercial thing, but actually on reflection, I do think, as the season goes on, as we get to those later weeks, we know how tight the table can get anyway. I do feel it will make the league a lot more exciting for sure.
Yeah, definitely. There's a massive commercial package behind all of that. I think there's sort of the initial match before the semi-finals and the final, and I think they've done it fair enough. I think the third place team will play always the lowest team that advances into the semi-finals, basically. And yeah, there's obviously an opportunity there, and it will ramp up the sort of intensity and what's at stake in the back end of the season. So I think overall it's a positive. I know yeah, been some critiques about it, but hopefully Watford can actually make use of that. So yeah,
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Sam, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Where can Watford fans find you across social media?
yeah. So I'm on pretty much any social media. I'm on TikTok, Twitter, and I'm at Sam Bunce _44, and then on Instagram, I've just launched a new Instagram just to make sure content's on there. So it's sambunce.journo on Instagram. So feel free to follow me.
Super stuff. Thanks, Sam. And thanks for watching at home. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. And if you're listening on audio platforms, make sure to leave us a positive rating or review. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.